All right, it is 1:03 here outside of Boston, and that means it's time to get going. My name's Noah Flaherty. I'm CTO and co-founder here at Vellum, and I am super excited to be joined with Vik from Coinbase. We'll give a proper introduction soon here, but I just want to start off by saying thank you all so much for joining our webinar series today. This is a three-part webinar series starting today. We've got another one next week, Wednesday, and then the final one the Wednesday after that. And the theme across these three episodes is building with AI doesn't have to be scary. It's super awesome to see folks from across the country and world. We've got folks from Seattle, New Jersey, San Jose, Toronto, and even Chile. So thank you all so much for joining us. Let us talk about the game plan for today. So today we've got Vik, Product and AI Innovation over at Coinbase. Next week, we've got Hage from Cerebras, and then Jay from El Catterton the following week. We've got a really exciting lineup of folks who have built really awesome things with AI and are going to be here to share their experiences. So I just want to say, first off, thank you, Vik, and thanks to the others that will be joining us shortly here. Some tips for those here live. Please, this is for you. Some tips for maximizing your experience. First off, stay curious and have fun. It's awesome to see like so much engagement in the chat already. Please keep it coming. Get inspired with the ideas that are shared here and shared in the chat today. Part of the goal is to understand how to navigate the complexities and challenges that come with building from AI. But more than anything, just ask questions. We'll be fielding questions throughout the hour here, and anything that we don't get to, we'll make sure to hit at the end. But once again, this time, we're super excited to be doing this, but it's ultimately for all of you that are listening in. A quick couple words about Vellum. We are a product development platform for building AI systems. We help companies take early stage AI ideas and bring them all the way into production grade features. So we've got, over 100, or all these product teams. We handle millions of API requests. We ship new functionality really, really fast, and we are VC backed. So if you're looking for tooling and platforms to help you accelerate your AI development process, check us out. But enough about me and Vellum. What I'm really excited to do is introduce Vik. Vik, could you say a few words about yourself, your role at Coinbase, and some of the things that your team has worked on?
Yeah, sure thing. So it's great to be on. I'm Vik. Been at Coinbase for about 4.5 years. I've been on the ML team pretty much the entire time. So when we started, we were doing primarily fraud and fraud models. Given that we're like moving a lot of money, and then of course it's the crypto industry, and there's a lot of risks there. And so really in my time, the mandate or sort of the charter has been to sort of increase the penetration of AI throughout the company, find interesting use cases, deliver more impact, and really what we would aspire for is to really create like an AI brand within the industry. And so we're part of the way there, but, we've got a lot more to do. But in the time I've been there, we've done a lot of great things. So just to kind of talk a little bit about this is, customer experience and customer support. It's a huge pain point, on days like this, as an example, when the market spikes, people try to go to the website, or go to the platform to trade. Maybe they run into some friction, or maybe they've, need to reset their password or their 2FA or something. And then they go to support. And so it's a huge, it's a kind of a good problem to have when people are like really coming to the site a lot, but it's also an avenue, of frustration actually for some people who have issues. And of course, Coinbase is known for having gone down sometimes and things like that, which we've improved greatly on in the years. Compliance is another one. As a fintech company, and especially one within an industry that's like kind of operating in a bit of an uncertain area, compliance is top of mind for the company. And so, the individual sort of compliance flows and things that we have to sort of, accommodate and are required to actually do can be very rife with a lot of like manual work, lots of flaws, lots of, false positives, things like that. And so we've been doing a lot of great things with AI to like sort of streamline the compliance process. I mentioned fraud earlier, but really what this is just like looking at a lot of different types of fraud. You have first-party fraud, second, third-party fraud. You have account takeovers. You have all sorts of things that are just constantly going on. It's a cat and mouse game. And so it's another one of those things that, is really top of mind for the company. And so like these first three ones I would consider to be like table stakes. And then, there's like other areas that are really, kind of like they're both growth or sort of efficiency areas. And so within the growth domain, we're doing things like notifications, determining who to send what to at what time, through what channel. We've got summary of market performance that we've listed here. We're going to be expanding into onboarding. We do some personalization, so we do a bunch of things. And then lastly here, we've been really excited about the prospect of being able to move faster from a development perspective. And so that's like leveraging, a lot of the like state-of-the-art code generation models that we're seeing, but also developing proprietary things like for ERC20 contracts on the Ethereum network as an example, or, generating, generating queries for different things, whether you're an engineer, data engineer, or data scientist.
This is awesome, Vic. Thank you so much for sharing. From my perspective, it's just so cool to see like such a broad spectrum of use cases for AI, and how it's like not just like one feature, but it's really just kind of like permeated so many aspects of Coinbase. And I don't know about you, but my take is like we're just going to see that more and more and more throughout software companies, where it's not just like one AI feature, it's just like an inherent part of the development stack.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there, like, it's interesting. I'll go to like an AI thing, or, and it's like, oh, you're from Coinbase. What do you guys do with AI, right? And so it's like a nice opportunity actually to kind of go in depth here, because I think you hit it right on. Like, there's so many different flavors of AI. There's so many different ways in which it can improve a business. A lot of it is behind the scenes. Like a number of these things you wouldn't even see if you're logging into the app. So it's not obvious, like say TikTok or, one of these other apps where, it's very clear how AI plays a big role. It can do so many things. There's use cases that aren't even listed here around like how we operate our exchange and how we operate our infrastructure. And so it's just limitless. So
yeah, so cool. Cool. Well, let's talk about the game plan for today. So in today's discussion, there's 6 key areas that I think we're going to cover. One, how AI ideas are prioritized. Second, how you can ensure that AI is like not just like generating things that look reasonable, but are actually accurate, and whose responses are grounded in some like known context. Number 3, we'll talk about some of the challenges faced in scaling AI from proof of concept to production, like reliable feature. Number 4, there's been a lot of hype around AI agents lately. And I think some of the challenges in building them is A, like, what the heck is an agent, but like, and what's the definition of one? But B, like, what does it take to build one that you can actually trust, debug, have visibility to, all that good stuff. And then finally here, talk about the impact of some of these AI initiatives so far, and like the business impact and improvements that these things have made. Cool. So I guess from here, Vic, just to open it up, we mentioned on your prior slide some of the AI use cases that Coinbase has implemented, but I would love to pick one or two that you wouldn't mind kind of diving a little deeper into, like starting with what the problem statement was, how you identified that AI was the right solution for it, and like what the kind of like end experiences for your customers.
Yeah, I can give you, I think, 2 notable examples. So one is around, so basically, the way that it works at like a, very fast moving company, it's like sometimes it's an opportunistic, there's something that we see that we can use AI with. And then other times there's like, okay, there's a code red, there's like some burning problem. And it's like, how can each individual team contribute to this, if it makes sense, of course. And like, we on the ML team, we think, given the breadth of opportunities, we're like, okay, fraud is a big problem, or like, let's say account safety. It's not even just fraud, it's like a specific type of fraud. And so this kind of really hit us hard at one point, and, it poses so many different risks to us. And so that was an instance where, we said, what does our existing process look like? Is there any sort of upside to using ML here? Is it feasible? Can we get buy-in for it? And then we sort of like just kind of like work through that. And so, of course, it needs to sort of make dollars and cents in a way. So it needs to be something that's going to yield an ROI from a development perspective. And so this really kind of like matched a lot of different things. It was like high impact, high importance to the business. feasible, how to use like AI in this type of area. And so, it hit a lot of like those like initial things. And so then, when you go further, you're like, well, do we have data for it? That's actually maybe even more of a principal question that you asked from the outset, but it kind of goes into that feasibility bucket. But basically, it's like what the existing process, a lot of humans in the loop. It's a lot of manual reviews of things. It's a lot of sort of coarse, imprecise rules. And so this is often a way that like systems are working where that ML eventually like outperforms. And so it was no different here. We saw, hey, we have so much high friction, lots of false positives, lots of lots of bad things getting through, and it's
Specifically in fraud detection, just
within fraud detection. And I'll just say, like, for it specifically here, it's account safety. So it's like things like SIM swaps, where your SIM is changed, or your account is compromised as a result because your 2FA codes are going to a different device, and all of that. And so a lot of people think they're getting hacked, but it's actually, or they think their Coinbase was hacked, but actually it's like their credentials or something else was hacked. And so either way, we've got to be sort of like mindful and proactive about addressing it. And so, so like I said, a lot of the things that we were doing earlier in fraud kind of pertained here. So we had a lot of data from like previous decisions that were made. We've got all sorts of, interaction data, how users are using the platform. And then from there, and then we have, of course, like decisions. So it's like up, down, yes, no's, things that you can sort of train a model on, like the label. So here it was, what can we, like, what features do we have? ML features, do we need to develop new features? So you spend a bit of time figuring that out. And then, you start building like a model. And in this case, it could be just like an XGBoost, like a traditional sort of linear model. And from there, you can kind of back test. You can see how is the model performing compared to the rules in the past if we just run all of our old data on it. And so from there, you'll get to start to see, like, here are some pros and cons. Here are some conditions where maybe it's a little bit weaker. And then from there, like, you have to develop like an engineering system. So this kind of goes into some of the other questions that I think we'll get to, but it's not just the model, the way you integrate it, and kind of like think about all the different use cases and things like that you have to address. And so from there, over, like, long story short, it gets into production, it outperforms what was existing there. And then, a lot of people are very happy, and you can all celebrate. And then of course it like bodes well for like future investments. Cool. And so, yeah, so that's like one use case. And then there's like another one I can go into if you want.
So I guess to synthesize that a little bit, Vik, it sounds like when determining whether or not to use AI, first it's like, look for the opportunity. It could be something that's opportunistic or like hair on fire problem. Then determine, like, is AI ML the right solution to this problem? It sounds like certain problems that are ripe for AI being a solution could be things like processes where humans are involved to make like decisions where there's like fuzzy data involved, where there's like historical data on decisions that were made such that you could train a model based on that thing. And then ideally something where you can capture feedback after the fact. You mentioned thumbs up, thumbs down, like it was right, it was wrong, and you can like kind of use that to back test and like understand whether or not the model, once it's live, is doing what it's supposed to. Is that all kind of fair to say so far?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That's generally how we do it. I mean, I think within organizations, it's an interesting thing. Like when it comes to working at a bigger company, getting the buy-in and making sure that you have like really good partners. I think that's one challenge with ML is like, it feels like a black box to a lot of people. They don't really know what it is. Some people love it though, because maybe they've worked at it in a previous company, or they like just know the technology. And so that is like one big, I think, factor into like what you prioritize. If you think that one is going to involve all sorts of overhead, all sorts of risk, all sorts of, maybe other like even political things at a company, maybe you shy away from that for a bit, and then you kind of like figure out like when the right time to attack that problem.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. And I'd love to dive in a little later on like how you might instrument systems such that it makes it feel like less of a black box. But before we go further in that direction, you mentioned, the first use case is fraud detection. I would love to hear a little bit about the second use case.
Yeah. So the second use case is like, I guess this would have been, late 2022, or I forget actually when exactly, but it was basically when, ChatGPT had come out, GPT-3 was out, and it kind of just like lit the entire industry on fire in terms of like, it was funny actually at Coinbase, they'd say like, why aren't we doing anything with AI? And we actually had to say like, we're doing a lot already, but maybe it's not generative AI. And so like, there's kind of some of that, but nevertheless, really it was like, how do we leverage this type of technology? What is the right way? And so like, basically it took us quite a while to figure out what approach we wanted to take. We're a risk averse company, as I mentioned, in terms of certain types of things. We're very, regulated and cautious around doing things the right way. And so, for all of and about security and data privacy and all of these different types of things, we have like a pretty high bar. And so the products that were out initially did not really suffice. Just because you have an API somewhere, it didn't mean that it was enterprise grade. And so we worked with some of the hyperscaler partners to develop something that was like really suitable for our type of a business. And so basically from there, it was just like, it was a little bit of a different type of project than others, because even like now people are like, well, what can it be used for in the real world? Not just like Q&A, but like outside of that. And so basically we wanted to sort of like serve a secure enterprise grade API for developer teams to use around the company, and also exposed via an interface so that like people can, I don't know, put in their tech specs, or maybe try to figure out what sort of like emails to write, or if they want to write their performance review, or if they need to do this or that, or just even check their language. And so it was more of an opportunity where we wanted like lots of mini experiments happening within the company. But I think the challenge here was just that like I mentioned earlier, these other solutions just did not meet the bar. I mean, there's issues with accuracy and hallucinations, things that we'll talk about later, that just were not something that our, legal, privacy, data teams were willing to accept at that time. And so at one hand, we're getting lots of pressure. What are we doing? Why aren't we doing more? And then at the other hand, we're like, well, we're looking at this and it's not quite there yet. And so, but again, over time, we kind of figured it out. And so now we've got like an internal platform that exposes many different LLM APIs, has grounding, has observability and evaluation built in. And it's like we're getting more into like the agent space as well.
Very cool. I mean, it's like crazy that we're talking like you guys were early to the game, but it sounds like, but really this is just a couple of years ago. And like the industry's changed so much in just that amount of time, from like the quality of the models to the tooling that can be used for things like, it sounds like you've built in-house observability, grounding, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the market was changing so fast, where it was like, between, I don't know, a couple quarters, like you didn't have any observability tools, then you have so many. Some of them are ready, some of them are not. And then similarly on like enterprise grade stuff. So it's like, oh, instead of, Microsoft Azure has something that's now like good for you, but it didn't work. It wasn't there 6 months ago when we needed to make a decision as to like which direction to pursue. So that's like another challenge in of
like
itself.
The Wild West during that time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we lived it through it too. And I don't think it's over yet. It's still kind of the Wild West, but it's changing rapidly. Cool. And you've talked a little bit about this like customer experience chatbot and the fact that you need to be able to operate this within these kind of like risk averse areas, highly regulated. You need to make sure that the answers are accurate and context aware. So how, like, I guess for some of the more like technical folks here, like what are some of the steps that you actually took? Like what are some of the components of the solution, to the extent that you're comfortable sharing, that, enabled you to like deliver these internal APIs within these kind of like rigid constraints, it sounds like?
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, so thinking about what I can actually share, I can share some, but I would say like the biggest things were, and maybe this isn't technical, but I think it's really, really important to like invite sort of your cross-functional people, the people who are going to be on the front lines within support, into the process yourself that you're developing, and sort of collaborate with them. I think that does a lot of great things. It ultimately results in a better product. But some of the things, as an example, that they were really, really adamant about was things like the golden set of, say, questions that we wanted to have for like a fine-tuning use case, if that's what we wanted to do, or just to be able to evaluate one of the off-the-shelf models in terms of what the outputs are. Lots of like iterations on prompts, lots of orchestration, figuring out orchestration between which model based on which sort of like question. So like basically, just to give some sense, it's like we had kind of like sort of less advanced, NLP techniques with our chatbot before. It didn't perform so great, and obviously that leads people to just like want to like call, or like they need somebody, so that was like a big issue for us. And so we were really trying to address this to reduce the what we call the contact rate, reduce sort of the escalation rate, things like that. And so just going back to some of the more technical things, it was a lot of like data cleansing, figuring out like sort of like what golden set were we going to use, which models performed best, like based on the types of questions, the many hundreds and thousands of interactions that we've had from the past. And then, once you kind of make a decision, and then you look at like the cost of like the API and the latency and different things like that, you have to kind of make a decision. And then really the next thing is to not just roll it out, all in one big bang. So it's a very, very slow rollout. It's, setting criteria around like where the person is where the person is from, what type of problem are they reporting, and then determining whether to go to the previous solution or the new solution. And so being able to sort of like gate this really well was another big consideration for us. And then and then I think other issues, like more technical type of things that we ran into, was a lot of like performance. We ran into sometimes it would just go offline or things like that. And so again, you've got to really design the system so that it can like accommodate these like fallbacks and things like that.
There's so many like juicy nuggets in what you've said here, Vik. I would love to tease a few of them apart. At Vellum, we think about AI development as like this 4-step loop where it's like experimentation, evaluation, deployment, monitoring, and you close that loop. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you followed a similar approach where you're doing a lot of iteration in the prompts, the model selection, trying to find the right fit between like cost, quality, latency of these outputs, involving like your subject matter experts to like tweak prompts, run experiments, and see if they can produce something better. You mentioned like golden data sets where you're like running evals and measuring like, is it performing as expected compared to like our gold standard? And you had like the slow rollout of deployment where you're trickling it out to more and more people, and then like seeing how it's performing based on different demographics. And it sounds like you're probably like rinsing and repeating as you see issues. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I'm trying to do it within like a fast-paced environment where, maybe something is like, it's performing better in like 90% of use cases, but then there's like that 10% that it's not quite doing. And so like, it's constantly looking at things like that, going back, figuring out, can we extend the existing solution? Do we need to create some new like sort of like condition in the overall flow, things like that. Another area of iteration was specifically on grounding. And so figuring out sort of like which documents and which like knowledge bases are we going to sort of tap into? How do we want to constrain it just to those knowledge bases? And then often that would lead to things like, well, we've got like stale knowledge bases, or we've got other things. And so then that required us to sort of like go back and work with others and try to figure some of this out. And then, but yeah, it's highly iterative and gradual.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that you said that was cool to hear was like, just like the involvement of less technical people in this process. People here like think of AI and think like, oh, that's like some hardcore technical stuff. But I don't know about you, but we are increasingly seeing that really good AI powered experiences are like a very cross-functional operation, right? Like you said. So I'd love for you to expand on like what role did some of the less technical folks on the team play in developing these like high quality AI features?
Yeah, I mean, so it's super interesting. Like when people say like now you can like, I don't know, just use one of the code generation tools now, or just go straight to like Anthropic artifacts, for example, and like develop an app using like, I don't know, Replit and all these other tools. So like effectively what these cross-functional people are is like they become almost like product managers, or like maybe just like solution engineers in a sense that they have a domain that they know very, very well. And as long as they're not like one of the, so I would just say like, some people are very skeptical of things and they go in with kind of this like, a certain attitude, but I think most people are like, hey, AI has so much potential. It's actually very important for me as a non-technical person within this domain to still understand what this disruptive technology is all about. And so, for instance, we have legal people who are like super interested in like how these things work, and they want to grow and add to their skill sets. And so basically the role that they played is like they're able to like define use cases, they're able to define user stories, they're able to define, you know, if you develop a flow chart, they can develop a flow chart, but then they can also like weigh in on like what you've developed and have you thinking about different edge cases that you want to address. So like they're like just brought in very closely. And then even like, I think the other good thing about these partners is that there are limitations to AI that you're not going to be able to just like fully address. There's a certain level where, you know, you can't guarantee 100% accuracy in all ways. It's not the same as like rule-based system as an example. So they're actually really good about like revising policies and helping us actually sell the value of some of these things, so that, hey, like maybe there is going to be a little bit of noise or a little bit of, you know, lower precision in some instances, but the net is going to be high. These are things that we can continue to work on as everything gets better. And so that's another way that they really are involved. And so, yeah, they're pretty much indispensable.
Yeah. You know, that's related to one of the questions that just came in from Patricio, which is like, how do you, given the fact that there are like, at least today, some fundamental limits with what AI is capable of or good at, like, how do you manage expectations within the team and like, kind of like be optimistic, but realistic at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I think this kind of goes back to like the initial question, which is around prioritizing use cases and how do you figure it out. I mean, I think that's something that you just have to, you know, maybe you go in with a decent sense of like what's feasible, but I think over time it's something that you develop a little bit better, a better instinct around whether this technology can actually address a problem. If this is something where, I mean, as we were saying earlier, there's a manual process with lots of training data and labels and things like that, or if it's a problem where you can look at almost like the distribution of outputs or some sort of decision, and there's a big, you know, fat middle of the distribution that you think you can capture a lot of things, or is this thing that's very spiky and there's certain long tail type of things that blow everything up. And then, so I think with all of that said, you need to kind of like go in, understand the landscape, and then appropriately sort of like, you know, communicate it right. I think, yeah. And I think the other thing is like bringing in people early. So like kind of goes into like how you work with like the different people that you need to be involved with, like the non-technical stakeholders or the end users and things like that. So one thing that we've done on more of the consumer facing experiences, and even with the chatbot, is to be able to sort of show the disclaimers and like the language saying, hey, this is AI generated, and different things like that. And so you kind of have to like say, here's the opportunity, whether it's feasible or not. If it is feasible, great. Are there some edge cases? Okay, how do we sort of like cover our butts a little bit? And, you know, that's where the disclaimer comes in. That's where the fallbacks come in. And then of course, if it's just not a good use of time for everybody, and I'm sure like we have way less time that we can than use cases. So you just kind of like have to shelve it and probably like come back to it or something.
Yep. Yeah, it sounds like, you know, it's a lot of it's about developing an intuition for what AI is good at and keeping somewhat up to date with its developments, such that more and more use cases become like feasible over time. For those kind of in the audience newer to the space that maybe haven't quite developed that intuition yet, a general rule of thumb I like to share with our customers is like, if you could write down a clear set of instructions, give it to an intern, and give it enough time, trust that they'll do like a really solid job, then it's like and like you're able to like point them to what information to consume in order to perform the task at hand, then it's probably good for AI. But if you yourself can't come up with a clear set of instructions or couldn't do the job yourself, like maybe not a good fit. But Vik, I would love your reaction to that. And if you have any like tactical like litmus tests that you like to share with people.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of framing it. I would say also look at like what the cost of a mistake is if something is out. So for instance, on some of our compliance use cases, you know, we can't afford to be wrong on a lot of these types of things. And so even if we could write the instructions, hey, look at this document, go scour the web and do this, things that agents are actually really good at, there's still kind of a point where when it comes to actually the final decision, you need to decide whether it's going to be feasible or, you know, applicable to your use case. And then that's the other thing that I think it's just so good to know about AI, and it's something that you can develop an intuition about. It's like, is this going to be like the final decision? Is it going to be something that just runs autonomously? Or there's so many things that a human in the loop can like benefit. Honestly, you train maybe that intern and have them look at, things that fall outside of a range. If it's like, hey, a 0.9 or below, or I would say like below a 0.9, hey, send it to this queue or something like that, have them look at it, or, there's all sorts of things like that. And so that's actually what I really enjoy about working in this field, is that there's so many different ways to approach problems. And
yeah, super cool. The cost of mistake is a really good one. Mm-hmm. So Vik, given how early to the game you guys were, and I would love to hear, on the, like, what are some of the like in-house toolings that you had to build to like have trust in these systems or facilitate the interactions between the different teams that are part of the development process? And like, where do you see opportunity for tooling companies in the space, or companies that are starting off on their journey? Like, what areas do you foresee them needing to invest in, similar to what you guys have done, whether it's like build in-house, buy, and operationalize these systems?
Yeah, I think for us, it's an interesting question, because at the same time we're developing sort of these generative AI capabilities, and we're having to build a good number of things. We're also developing an all new sort of MLP, traditional MLP tech stack. And so this, consists of things like moving from SageMaker, training, and, using something else for serving, something else for deployment, like moving more of our loads to like Databricks as an example. It's going from an in-house feature store to Tekton, or, maybe another solution like that. And so we're doing that at the same time. We're also trying to develop this generative. So like, I would say for us, it allowed us to sort of evaluate our entire approach and think about where is this industry going? Where do we want to be in a couple of years? And then approach the buy versus build discussion accordingly. And so for things like, as an example, something like Ray or, Anyscale, these are like great high potential solutions they could sort of support, and they're increasingly improving on like their LLM capabilities from like their traditional ML things. And so we're not going to build too much there. In terms of the things that we really felt like we didn't have enough on, at least that met our standard, was specifically on the evaluation and on some of like the data cleanliness and accuracy and grounding and things like that. And so like, I think what we did really internally, and it's nothing like too fancy, honestly. It's a lot of like developing really simple UIs to just like monitor results that can like kind of contain all of our sort of prompts that we use to evaluate, to ground responses and things like that, setting up a queue, setting up a process, using Slack automation to send review, to notify somebody to a human in the loop to review something. They can action on it straight from Slack. It kind of makes its way back into our database and whatnot. So like, it's a lot of stuff like that. But I think on the observability side was probably our biggest one from the outset.
Cool. I guess to abstract that away, it sounds like some of the components of this in-house tooling are things like observability, human in the loop, like reviewing queues, prompt management, evals, grounding. Any other like conceptual like categories of tooling that you found yourself building that I didn't cover there? Uh-oh. Do we have Vik? All right, looks like we might be facing a little technical difficulties. We'll give Vik a moment here. In the meantime, if people have questions in the chat, now's a great time, and I can hit some of them with answers, at least on my end and from my perspective. We've got one question so far that we'll take into account, which is like, how did your final users react to the AI experience overall? I can't speak for Vik and the Coinbase reaction, but I can say for some of our customers, there's a lot of ways that you can kind of actually measure user reaction. If you're building some end customer facing UI that uses AI, capturing things like did your customer think that the output was good or bad with a simple thumbs up, thumbs down, and capturing that? If you're generating a draft of something, did they edit the draft before hitting send, or did they hit send with no edits? We call that kind of like explicit versus implicit feedback that you can capture and really measure how your end users are reacting to the AI experience. But Vik, looks like Vik's back. I'm glad you're able to join. Vik, the question was, how did your final users react to the AI experience? And how I might add, how were you able to measure whether or not their satisfaction improved or declined over time? Ooh, we can't hear you, Vik. Maybe you're muted, or maybe the mic is not working. Not yet.
Is this better?
There we go. You're back.
All right, perfect. I'm off the AirPods. So yeah, I heard the question. So, and apologies for that. So in terms of explicit feedback, we experiment with everything. And so, when we're able to see that there's a higher, and we have the thumbs up, thumbs down on our chatbot as an example. And so we're able to get signals like that. And then, of course, we're able to see what is the escalation rate in treatment versus control. We're able to kind of further segment things and really get a good granular sense of where things are outperforming versus underperforming. And so those are very explicit things, as you mentioned. And then I think on the implicit side, it's an interesting one, because on one hand, I think people are pretty pretty bullish on the technology in general. And so they really see that even if something isn't changing everything about their function and having, so many great improvements, they feel like I guess the trajectory is very high. And so one of the examples of this has been on the growth side of our business, where, if we want to develop copy for emails, or if we want to develop a news summary for what's happening in the markets, instead of having a human curator do this every day, they're able to actually go into our system, modify prompts, see answers, and kind of and also there's new APIs that we're starting, that we're constantly exposing to everybody. And so from there, I think the best thing is just to be able to sort of improve the platform, improve the performance, add more APIs that folks have access to. And then I think in a true platform sense, try to ensure that things that you develop for a use case can sort of be sort of extended into others. And so if people are doing one thing for grounding, or sort of prompt tuning, or something like that, or even a feedback loop, or even a UI component specific to a certain AI experience, make that available to others, and think about, and so this is the little things that can trip you up, but it really over time it compounds and allows you to go much faster. And so all in all, I would say it's been very positive, but I think we've also been cautious around not trying to oversell it. And so it goes back to compliance. We're not going to say we're going to solve compliance on day one with this. It's more of hey, we'll help you out a little bit.
Well, it sounds like baked into that is just some good old fashioned software engineering principles around reusability and extensibility, right? If you're a small AI ML team and you've got a whole big company that wants to use AI for everything, building these modules or components that can be reused across these different AI use cases sounds really, really valuable.
Yeah, and I mean, as you just hit on, that is kind of an engineering principle that I don't want to say needs top-down direction, but it needs to be something that people are really aware that that's a pattern that we want to actually invest in. So it's always, you can develop something that's quick and, hacky or whatever, and it kind of gets the job done. But yeah, there's going to be things that, hey, you want to make something available for others and really evangelize this.
Are there a couple examples of things that you find to be good for reuse across teams? I'll share some of our experience afterwards from what we see across our customers, but curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think one is on evaluating responses out of our chatbot, or even on some of our news summaries. And so there's criteria that we have that are, based on our business and based on frankly, the quality of news that you find in crypto. Actually, right now, as an example, you have AI generated news, and it's basically it's an SEO thing or it's just they just, it's just pumping out content that's, and so it's low quality information as an example. And so we have criteria that says, the responses should be, useful to the customer. It shouldn't be sensationalized. It shouldn't be low quality information. It should avoid jargon. It should, not include things like financial advice, things like that. And so that pertains to many different use cases. And so if somebody goes to our chatbot and says, hey, what crypto should I buy? We should have like things in place that prevent against those types of, using the experience for that. And then that, of course, would extend into other use cases. So that's like, I think, a good one. Another one would be more increasingly on like the fine tuning sort of use cases where we're doing a little bit more now, but when we have fine tuning for one use case, thinking about the whole process and leveraging like Ray, for like an LLM fine tuning use case, and then being able to sort of like recycle that for others is like another one that I see a lot of potential for us.
Yeah, that's cool. That first one we see a lot, like reusable like guardrails, or maybe you have a central team that's defining the criteria for determining whether an LLM's output is like good versus bad. And then you can apply that criteria to a variety of different use cases. So guardrails or metrics we see very frequently being reused. Prompt snippets or like common templates we see. Tools or like tool definitions, especially for use by agents. You might use the same like CodeGen or calculator or web search tool across multiple different agents. Just some examples we see. So speaking of agents, there's a lot of hype around them. You've mentioned them a couple times. I would love to hear, Vik, like if you feel like what does agent mean to you, and what are some agentic use cases that Coinbase is building out, if you're comfortable sharing, and and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think like in terms of like the big splashy use cases that we're seeing, and it kind of goes to like when I mentioned earlier around developing kind of like this AI brand within like crypto and fintech and whatnot. I think we're seeing a lot of excitement around like AI, crypto agents, basically, given that like the blockchain, it's public data, it's available to everybody, it's available to be used for all sorts of ways. How can we sort of enable interesting experiences? And so one that we've been really bullish on is like with, not to get too far into the crypto rabbit hole or anything, but there's on-chain social protocols that are like on-chain Twitter. You could think of it like that, or there's like even trading use cases that people want to transact and do different things like that. We're seeing a lot of interest and a lot of experimentation around agents that can actually perform some of this. And so if I've got an on-chain business, or let's say that I'm a creator, or even like let's say a commerce brand or something like that, I want to reward people who are loyal to me. I can actually do that autonomously using an agent. Of course, you could maybe use rules to do some of this, but let's say that instead we want to go on social and say, hey, give a little bit of some coins to people who are talking good about your brand, or like run a sweepstakes or run a campaign like that. You can actually do that. You can also another interesting use case it's kind of like a gaming use case. Somebody developed a game, and then you can like chat with this game, and then it like rewards you. But it's doing this kind of instead of this I guess declarative or in a declarative way, it's doing it more probabilistic, kind of a whole new paradigm. And so that's kind of cool. I mean, in terms of like actual like revenue generation and business stuff, I think it's still anybody's guess, but I think people are really excited by the prospects. I think in like more sort of like tangible use cases that we've seen internally has been around kind of on those growth use cases, as I mentioned. So it's like, the first, and so this is the other thing about the product development sort of cycle at these companies is like, we saw an opportunity to summarize news that's happening. There's a human that's like doing it. We're like, okay, how can we help this person? That eventually became in kind of a vision for almost having like a Bloomberg. So instead of looking at just news, we can look at other types of data. We can synthesize it. We can summarize it. We can link it to price movements. We can do other things. And so it's not developed yet, but it's like, that's another area that we're sort of like gradually heading towards, is being able to do it. And then of course, like if you want to have news, but then also on-chain data, but then also some off-chain data using an Oracle, you need tasks, right, to do all of these different types of things. And then that's where the agent frameworks come in, is so that they can like perform all these different tasks and then ultimately develop an output that's useful for everybody.
Okay, so these agents are basically like autonomously making decisions and performing tasks kind of like behind the scenes. So we have one question here. Given that many people fear AI and the fact that it can make decisions outside of their control, how does AI and tech companies balance automation with empowering like humans' ability to make decisions and have authority over the decisions that are being made? And Vik, I think this ties nicely into something that we've talked about, which is like, baked into that is the assumption that you can analyze and observe what behavior and decisions and steps these agents are taking. So, yeah, what's your take?
Yeah, I think I don't see, I think it's going to be a while until like agents are really truly going to be like making all these decisions, especially for like a real organization, like an enterprise or like even a mid-market type of company. Maybe for a smaller company, you can do other things. But for these bigger ones, and let's say in a financial services or healthcare, insurance, or one of these types of things, it's like, humans are going to want to be involved. And so I think what this leads me to think is we're going to need like tooling that allows non-technical people and these humans who are making the decisions to almost like work in concert with AI systems. And so in real time, if you're able to get a sense of what decisions are being, made, what the outputs are, you can intervene, you can pause it, you can like go, you can start it back up again, make a change to this, let's say a prompt, and then deploy it in like a few clicks as an example, maybe have it just roll out for, I don't know, 10% of response, so being able to really get these people on the front lines involved in that whole workflow is going to be, I think, a really interesting area. I think it's going to be a new skill set that's needed. I'm not aware of any great solutions in that way yet. But that's kind of how I can see like humans in the loop and agents working sort of side by side.
Yeah, super cool. So I guess like step one is like observability and being able to like see what steps are being taken by these AI agents. Mm-hmm. Second is being able to like replay and like say, if I had changed this prompt or this model, what would the outcome have been instead? Third is like possibly in real time being able to like interrupt and say, hey, no, like actually pause here, let me weigh in and then continue. And we're seeing in the tooling space like a lot of companies, ourselves included, trying to like build the platforms to help exactly these things. So if anyone's in the crowd is excited about this stuff, check out our Vellum's Workflows product. I think it's in that direction, and these are exactly some of the types of problems that we're trying to solve here at Vellum. Super cool. Well, we have 10 minutes to go. If people have additional questions, please drop them in the chat. We'll save some time towards the end here to answer them. I guess, Vik, one of my final questions for you is, we've talked a lot about these AI use cases, how you've built them, some of the tooling that you've needed. But what's the impact been? Clearly things have been going well if you're still doing this a few years later. But what impact has this had on Coinbase and the company?
Yeah, it's been huge, honestly. I mean, fraud, going back to kind of like our bread and butter, it has been, we've delivered huge improvements there. And so like when you're going from like kind of coarse rules to an advanced deep learning model, as an example, you're going to find that your precision and recall are just much higher. And that'll lead to both better detection, but then also less friction for good users. And so when you see that, you can actually see cost reductions through less fraud, and then revenue increases through fewer sort of false interventions and less churn, less frustration. And then that has downstream impacts on CX, fewer CX interactions, less spend on CX as an example. So the whole sort of cycle works in that way. On the CX side, if we're able to reduce what we call reduce handling time, so like lower time to address a user's one of their questions or issues, when you can either reduce the number of escalations and just shorten that time completely, make it totally self-serve, that has huge implications, both again from a cost perspective, but then also on the user frustration, user loyalty, user satisfaction, things like that. And so all in all, like we experiment a lot. And so we've seen validated, net revenue, increased revenue plus reduce costs in tens of millions of dollars over.
That's wild. Tens of millions of dollars of like.
Yeah, and the cool thing too, I think, is with the consumer company, you're able to do things like, if you improve something by like 0.5%, that actually has huge impacts for for a large consumer style company. So as an example, if we're able to do something that's going to increase some, I don't know, either trading activity or funding on their accounts or whatever, that actually has huge impacts, and it compounds over time, as I said, as the models improve.
I mean, that's so cool to hear, like the quantified value, just like the stark ROI that's come with it all. Really, really cool. Vik,
and
are there any?
I was just going to add that, like, and again, my challenge, I'm a product manager, so I'm having to think about these like tactical and strategic things, but it's like you have some successes, and then you can start to kind of take some risks, maybe where you're not selling a day one impact, as much. And so you've got to have to like be very selective and I think strategic around trying to deliver impact, try to get some quick wins and get everybody talking, get everybody, bought into what you're able to do, but then also use those as opportunities to maybe allocate some resources to something that's more on the experimental side or more on like the venture side. So you never want to just be doing like the safe stuff. You want to be thinking like innovatively as well.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome, Vik. Is there anything that you wish I had asked you? One of my favorite questions. No pressure if not. We've got a few questions in the chat that we can head
yeah, I probably don't have a great answer for that one, but no, it's a good question though. That's a good one.
Cool. You mentioned earlier, like I think you mentioned something along the lines of like providing the tooling and frameworks for people internally to use AI in their own jobs. We have a question here, which is, do you allow, or like, does your company allow the use of artificial intelligence for like actually writing code and like doing part of like performing some of the engineering? And what's your take on that topic?
Yes, we do. In terms of actually like making sure it like, let's say automating deployments and just having it like get merged and approved and everything like that, that's not the level that we're operating at yet. But in terms of developing code, absolutely. We've seen a lot of great impacts from that so far.
Yeah, likewise on our end. I mean, we're avid users of Cursor and all that good stuff.
And a huge one also on like the data, I would just come back to the data side. I mean, there's so many, different types of people who need to write a SQL query, whether you're an engineer, you're a data scientist or PM or whatever. And it's actually had a lot of nice impacts for us there too.
Makes sense. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone who have contributed questions today. As we begin to wrap up, Vik, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. And for those out there in the crowd, please feel free to continue the conversation. Here are some QR codes to both Vik and my LinkedIns, and we're happy to continue the conversation, respond to additional questions. There's even been some chatter about hey, are there any internship opportunities in this space? So all kinds of good stuff. If there's any final questions, we'll hang around for a few more minutes to answer them. But Vik, I just want to say thank you again.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure.
Awesome, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and end this event. Thank you all for joining and hope to see you next week, Wednesday. Vik, thanks again. Take care, everyone.